And for newcomers, we're excited to have you here with us today for the first time. In this episode, we're discussing how to radically accelerate inclusion, challenging conventional wisdom with real science to improve talent outcomes and organizational results. And we'll share a real case study with our special guest client. Now, as I quickly share some housekeeping notes, drop in the comments or the chat box on social where you're joining in from today. We are recording today's session, so if you're interested in a replay, be on the lookout for an email later today. That email is going to include a survey for feedback, as well as a number of resources that are aligned with today's conversation. We suggest putting your phone on Do Not Disturb, quitting out of your email and messaging apps so you can get the most out of today's discussion, and it's also going to help with your audio and video quality. And we love interaction, so feel free to share your thoughts and comments with us in the chat. Now, to get this show underway, I'm going to introduce our speakers. Our guest for today is leading the development and implementation of CVS Health's Diversity, Equity, Inclusion, and Belonging strategy. In her current role, she fuels innovation to achieve exceptional outcomes by unlocking the unique and diverse talents of CVS Health colleagues to shape and drive DEIB strategy forward. Her professional journey has taken her all over the world, including Dubai and Southeast Asia, where she spearheaded the development of virtual health programs. In her 20-plus year tenure at CVS Health, she has brought problem solving, communications, strategic development and execution, program design, global project management, and DEIB expertise to several roles. She earned her bachelor's in legal studies and master's in healthcare administration from the University of Maryland. Please join me in welcoming Vice President of Diversity, Equity, Inclusion, and Belonging at CVS Health, Ernisha Pender. Ernisha, welcome to the show, and thank you for being here with us today.
Thank you so much. I'm so excited. So thank you all for having me.
Yes, absolutely. And our moderator for today is a public speaker who engages on a variety of topics surrounding DEI, leadership, and women in the workplace, not to mention her TEDx talk on banishing the miscongeniality complex. She is also the author of the book, Would the World Be Better If We Were All Alike? Her expertise in leadership development, diversity, strategic planning, and HR led her to join NLI, where she engages in client-facing consulting and facilitating teams to support organizational programs. A warm welcome to our distinguished faculty of leadership and performance at NLI, Christy Pruitt-Haynes. Great to have you here today, Christy, and I'm passing it over to you.
Wonderful, thank you. And at the moment, I am having a slight issue where I can't start my video. So if one of our phenomenal tech people could help me with that, I would greatly appreciate it. But we're going to keep things moving while we get that going. So Ernisha, thank you again so much for being with us this morning. I am so excited to have this conversation with you. There we go. Now you can all see me. Sorry for that slight delay there. But again, thank you so much for being with us this morning. I am so excited to dive in and talk a bit about CVS's journey with Include. Before we do that, I'm assuming most everyone here knows who CVS is. I can't imagine that they don't. But if you wouldn't mind just telling us a bit about who CVS is, who it is you serve, what you do, and then we'll jump in and be a bit more specific and talk about your journey with Include.
Absolutely. So happy to share. So CVS Health, as most people know, is your neighborhood pharmacy. We are on many corners across America. What folks may not know about CVS Health is that we are much more than just your local pharmacy. So the CVS Health enterprise is comprised of a number of different businesses that not only focus on providing health insurance for members, but also home health care, delivering all sorts of services across the continuum of healthcare. We strive to be one of the nation's leading health solutions providers, and our purpose is to bring our heart to every moment of our customer and community's health.
I love that. I love that. And I will say, as a devout CVS user, I love the fact that I get everything delivered right to my front door. So it is a huge convenience for me. So I absolutely love that and all of the services you all offer.
Yes.
So with that, yes, we're going to talk a bit about Include, your role with CVS, et cetera. But before we get into that, the one other question I would love to ask, and I think I'd love to really start conversations with this, is what was your why? So when CVS started thinking a bit about wanting to partner with NLI to roll out Include, what was the why? What was the goal that you all really wanted to achieve with that? And then we'll talk about the impact and how those goals have been reached.
Yeah, this is such a great question. Thank you so much for asking it. The why is simple. This conversation is about everyone. And so, as we thought about what it meant for us as a company and driving that purpose that I just talked about, this is a purpose that impacts everyone. Everyone, healthcare is a concern or a need for everyone. And so, if we're thinking about harnessing the power of our collective 300,000 colleague company, the best way to do that is to make sure that all of them, all experiences, all perspectives, all backgrounds, identities, et cetera, are welcome at the table, and that we're harnessing that to make great decisions on behalf of the customers, communities, and patients that we serve. And so the why was very simple. Include is something that undeniably welcomes everyone to the table.
I completely agree. And I love that. And for those who may not be as familiar with include, people sometimes think that we would have titled that the neuroscience of inclusion. And obviously, that is at the core of what we talk about with our include program. But it is really about the neuroscience of smarter teams. So I love the way you put that, Arnisha, in saying that this is about everyone. The goal is to make sure everyone feels a part of CVS, to make sure everyone's voice can be heard, that everyone is welcomed, and to be, kind of using in quotes, that everyone is included. So that is the goal, to bring everyone together and to create smarter, more effective teams that can really function as a singular unit. So with keeping that in mind, I'd love to hear a bit about your include journey. So can you describe the initiative for us and what that user experience was like for all of the team members who experienced include?
Absolutely. So this journey for us dates back actually to early 2022. And we've enjoyed such a fantastic partnership with NLI. I can't stress that enough. But in 2022, we were approaching, the need to really broaden the conversation within our enterprise and to ensure that we were looking at more than just race, ethnicity, and gender. Not that those things are not important, but also we understand that, individuals have a multitude of identities, and we wanted to make sure that we were rolling out learning across our enterprise that was mindful of that and that prioritized and centered that. We also found, as many companies, the need to find commonality and to bring folks closer together. And so the beautiful thing about Include is it looks purely at us as individuals and as human beings, and what happens in our brains when we are excluded versus what happens in our brains when we are included, and then provides those practical tips and tools in bite-sized pieces that you can quickly digest, learn, but also, practically apply to your day-to-day. And so for us, our journey was a twofold approach. It was a top-down approach, but it was also grassroots and bottoms up. We wanted to make sure that we were not assuming for our colleagues what the user experience would be with Include. And thanks to NLI, we were able to customize our journey. Even though the videos are microburst learning, they're 5 minutes in length, we wanted to give our colleagues the time to really absorb each one of the key concepts across the Include module, which is finding common ground, lifting people up, and creating clarity. And so, we wanted to make sure that there was enough space and time for people to actually really digest it. And so what we did was we leveraged a group of individuals we have within our company who are our change ambassadors, as we refer to them. And they were really able to help us design a user journey that would meet all of our colleagues where they're at. This group is a multitude of colleagues across various roles, levels, business units that represent the company. And they were able to tell us what would work in terms of the user journey. But we also felt it was important to ensure that we had buy-in from our leaders. And so in July of 2022, I actually had the pleasure of hosting a symposium that was attended by our CEO, our Chief HR Officer, our Chief People Officer, excuse me, and our Chief Health Equity Officer that really started to introduce this concept of Include. David Rock was also present at that symposium and addressed our audience as well. And that was super impactful in driving our leaders' engagement with Include. And so 2022, we rolled that out with the expectation that our leaders would wholeheartedly embrace this. And we framed it as something that would help them in their leadership journeys, not just from a engagement perspective, but just in continuing to drive better business results, quite frankly, and making sure that people could show up at work every day and feel a sense of belonging and feel that they were empowered to make really great decisions on behalf of the customers and communities that we are tasked with taking care of.
I love that. And I really love that you started this with that symposium and getting that leadership buy-in. And something that you mentioned that I think it's really important to really underscore is that you wanted to make sure that your leaders realize this isn't just, sort of a DEI initiative. It's something that's going to help them in their leadership overall. And I believe that's one of the real strengths of Include. Obviously, there are the DEI implications. That's the basis of it. We want to have diverse organizations. We want to have all of our team members know and feel like they are valued and appreciated and welcomed within the organization. But we also recognize that this is something that applies to everyone and applies to every part of our job. It's all about how we make decisions and making sure that we're making them in the best way and we're including all of the right people and have those wide perspectives. So I think so often people sort of hear this is a DEI initiative and assume they know what it's about or assume it's only going to benefit this small number of people within the organization. But the reality is, if you've pointed out so beautifully, it affects everyone, it benefits everyone, and it's about everyone. This isn't just about marginalized communities or marginalized team members. It really is about everyone because we are all diverse. We all have moments where we walk into a room and may feel as though we don't belong, feel as though we're a part of that out group for whatever reason. So I agree. And I think approaching it through the lenses that we use with Include really helps to make the point that this benefits the entire organization. And I think that's what helps, in my opinion, kind of get everyone on board, but also helps to implement it in a really meaningful way. So hopefully that's been
Absolutely.
your experience.
It has, and really, we had rolled out some prior training, and some of the information we learned was around the coding that we do as human beings when we meet someone, and how quick we are to formulate an opinion or a judgment about whether or not we will get along with someone based on very superficial things,
Mhm.
based on what we can see. And so, while that is those things are important, those aren't the only things that make up a person. And so, I always like to use the example, what you see on camera, I identify as a Black woman. But what you don't see is I identify as an individual with a disability. I also am a military spouse. Those identities are also important to me, and I don't want to have to choose which one is more important. I just need to make sure that we have an environment where they're all taken care of. And that's really what Include allows us to do. It strips away that initial superficial coding that our brains do. And it just takes us back to that human element of, as a human being, this is how it feels. It feels good to be included. It feels bad to be excluded. So let's not engage in behaviors that make other people feel excluded. Let's bring everybody together.
Absolutely. And I'm glad you mentioned the fact that there's sort of the external. So, similar to you, when people see me, they see a Black woman, or maybe they hear my accent and think a Black woman from the South. But there are so many ands that I like to say. We are all a collection of ands. So I am a woman, I am Black, and I'm a mom, and I'm an aunt, and I'm a bourbon lover, and I'm someone who is visually impaired, and I think Include really acknowledges all of the ands that each of us have and allow us to show up and interact in our workplaces with all of those identities sort of attached to us. So I think that's a real strength of the program. So, and going back though to CVS's experience, was there anything that surprised you about your journey as you were going through Include and rolling that out?
Yes, there was so much that surprised me. The one thing I'll mention that was most surprising for us was, as I stated, the microburst learning opportunity was really attractive for us because, again, we had had experience rolling out other training. It was very time intensive, and we heard from leaders that our colleagues don't have a lot of, like, we want to do this, but we don't have a lot of time. And so we're like, oh, 3 5-minute videos, practice tool, research summary. This should be a no-brainer. what we learned was that leaders actually wanted to bring their teams together to take this learning experience together. And so, I have an individual on my team, Rayanne Elbasher, who actually created instructor-led version of this training. She's created some train the trainer guides, really, which has been impactful at rolling this out across our enterprise and being able to reach larger audiences of individuals in delivering this training. What has resulted is some amazing dialogues with leaders and their teams on not only the principles of include, but actually the practical application for their business unit. So what does this mean for how we interact with our customers? What does this mean for how we interact with with each other? And it's really been one of the things that we get a lot of requests for that over directing people to, we'll direct people to the training on our learning platform. And they're like, no, we don't want that. We want someone to come and do this for us in person. I have several of those requests in my inbox right now. So that has been what has been most surprising. And we've got several testimonials from even senior most executives who have just raved about the learning experience, the value, and the way in which it has really helped drive that sense of inclusion and belonging across their teams.
That is wonderful. I love that that's been your experience. And I have to say, we hear very similar things from all of our clients, because the goal, again, with Include is to create those stronger teams, but to do so in a way where everyone understands their value, understands their role, and is able to show up as their authentic self. So I think the fact that you've experienced and seen that they want to have those conversations, they want to go deeper. That's just I think both a testament to the program, but also quite honestly, and more importantly, a testament to the way you've rolled it out and the fact that you've created this both as a priority, but also as a safe place to have these conversations and a place where the entire organization recognizes the value in having these conversations and recognizes the value of creating these stronger teams. So that's wonderful. So in thinking more then about the experience, and as you were both rolling out Include and going through that journey, I would imagine there were some lessons along the way that you learned that may have even tweaked how you approached the topic, how you engaged with your teams. And you've talked about some of those where you noticed people wanted more of that face-to-face conversation with their teams. But were there other lessons that you learned along the way that may have affected either how you implemented the program or how you sort of thought about what your next steps were?
Absolutely. Given that our company is very complex, so we have corporate facing colleagues, we have retail colleagues. And so, as you can imagine, our colleagues who work in our CVS stores, their ability to engage with Include looks very different from what our corporate colleagues' ability looks like. And so, what we learned is even though Include is very, minimal from a time commitment, we still needed to customize the learning to meet those colleagues where they're at. We can't always expect them to come to us. And so NLI has been invaluable at helping us create customized tools and resources that we can leverage across our distribution and our retail division so that our colleagues too have the benefit of also feeling that sense of inclusion and belonging by having their leaders talk with them about the key concepts of Include. And so we even have some of our retail divisions who are at 100% completion, which if anyone out there knows what it's like to work in a retail environment, that is tremendous.
Tremendous. Yes.
That speaks to the dedication of our leaders that this is a priority. This is important for our leaders. And so they made it a priority to make sure that their colleagues had an opportunity to experience this learning as well.
Let me first applaud you. To get any organization to 100% on anything is a huge task, but to do it with a retail organization when you have people that are customer facing, who aren't just naturally sitting in front of a computer all day, then that takes an extra level of dedication and commitment, both from the organization overall, but also from those team members. So I think it really speaks to how important it was to CVS. Yes, and I see several comments in the chat where people are, echoing that is quite impressive, and it absolutely is. So I love that you were able to do that. Would love to ask, just in thinking a bit more about getting to that 100%. Were there any tactics or any things that you did that you think really helped? Is it something that was maybe talked about a lot in various team meetings and things of that nature? How did you actually achieve this slightly miraculous feat?
And I want to be clear, it's not 100% across all of our retail locations, but we do have our teams are split up into divisions. And so we do
Yes,
have several divisions of our retail organization that have 100% completion.
perfect.
And it really started with the leaders. It started with the leaders first engaging those colleagues who may sit in retail, but also they have a corporate facing role and have the capacity to take the learning as we intended it to be rolled out, making the time to actually go through it themselves to understand what it was about and the value it could add to their teams, but then also partnering with us. So we have not designed this journey in a bubble. This has not just been a journey that my team and I have designed, or even with NLI. We've actually engaged the support of those leaders to say, tell us what we need to know to make this meaningful, but also available and attainable for your colleagues to be able to enjoy and appreciate and learn from. And so it really was their willingness to collaborate with us that led us to the point of having their teams be at 100% completion with this learning experience.
Perfect. And I love that you did that. You know, so often I see so many organizations have phenomenal training available. They have a great plan to roll it out, but sometimes that plan is created in a bit of a bubble or a silo where you aren't thinking about how do our team members, how can they actually engage with this material? What do their day-to-day challenges look like? And how do we need to factor that into how we deliver this training and how we present this opportunity? So actually reaching out to your leaders and involving them in that rollout plan, involving them in the implementation, I would imagine was critical, and something quite honestly that I wish organizations would do, because I do think at that point, not only do we see what we see higher training numbers or percentages, but we would also see the material really integrated into their day-to-day work lives. So it doesn't become just a check the box moment. It's like, okay, my whole team did this. It actually becomes part of who they are. And I think that's when it becomes really impactful. Would you agree with that?
I would definitely agree. I think one of the things we often forget is that even when we're trying to roll things like this out, even the mere fact that if you roll it out without taking others' experiences into consideration, the training itself can be exclusionary.
Yes.
And we didn't want to do that. I always ask my team, how many of us actually know what every business unit does and every role within every business unit? We don't. So since we don't, we have to go to the experts or the SMEs, and we have to make sure that they're informing us so that we can make the best decision again to meet the colleague where they're at, not always expecting the colleague to come where we are. And we are in the customer service business. We have externally facing customers, but our colleagues are our customers too. They're my team's customers. And so as we are rolling things like this out, that is to drive that sense of inclusion, we don't want to be exclusionary.
So well put. And I think we often forget that for some departments within organizations like DEI, HR, finance, et cetera, our customers are our team members, and we need to factor in what their days look like when we're creating opportunities for them to make sure it's going to be something that really meets them where they are. So again, great approach and great way to implement this. I want to answer a couple of questions in the chat and then go back to asking you a few additional questions. Amy asked, is Include available to individuals or just organizations? We currently roll it out to organizations. We do have a new program with NLI called LEAD that's going to factor in a lot of our different products and opportunities. A lot of our background in science is woven into LEAD. So that is one of our direct to consumer programs, and there are going to be others. So keep your eyes open for that. I'm sure they can drop both information about LEAD, but also information about Include, so you can bring that into your organization. And there was one more question. I am trying to scroll through to find it quickly. Oh, yes. Someone asked, curious about what is set in place weeks and months after the end of the program. So there are a lot of sustainment opportunities because, again, I think we've talked some about, and Arnisha, I think you would agree, we don't want this to be a one and done. You sit in front of your computer and never hear about it again. So I am happy to share a bit about some of the things we do around sustainment, but would love to hear maybe from CVS and from what your experience is. How have you kept this going? How have you kept kind of the conversation continuing in the hallways?
Yeah, so we too took advantage of the sustainment toolkit that NLI offered. We customized it, we made it available for all of our leaders. We also created a dedicated site on our intranet pages so that we could point leaders and colleagues to that site as well to encourage them to always, remember and refresh yourself with the key principles. And then we just simply look for practical ways to, encourage people to remember those principles. So making find common ground, lifting people up, creating clarity, common language that we use in talking points and calls to action when we're asking our leaders to drive certain things across the enterprise, reminding them that we have this tool that is a resource that they can leverage to continue the conversation. We have new hires all the time, so we will never be at 100% in terms of getting folks, familiar with the content. And so just continuously reminding leaders that we have this available for them. They are asking us what's next, and we are working to see what other unique and creative ways we can employ within our enterprise to ensure that this conversation continues, because it's a critically important conversation, and we certainly don't want it to die down. We want to make sure that we keep the momentum that we have.
Wonderful. Very good. Very good. And you mentioned, and I love that you're doing this, that this is something that continues to be available, it sounds like, to new hires that come in. So many organizations approach training as a one and done. We're going to do it today and we may not bring it out for another 5 years. But as your organization changes and you bring in new people, really making this a part of the ether, a part of the culture where you continue to use that language, that's, I think, just keeps it really fresh for everyone and continues to keep everybody involved in that. So that is wonderful. And thank you for the questions that are coming in the chat. Feel free to keep those coming. We want to make sure we are weaving those into our conversation and addressing all of your questions as well. So feel free at any point to continue to drop those. So Arnisha, we've talked a little bit about, and I would love to just go back to it for a moment on scaling the program. So obviously you mentioned the number, and it has now escaped me. I don't want to misquote you, but the total number of employees that you have within CVS Health, but it is significant and substantial. So when you think about wanting to roll something out to a community that large, tell us a little bit about how that has gone, how many people have been able to engage with Include thus far, and how rolling this out throughout all levels of your organization.
Yeah. So our colleague population is a little over 300,000. So we are like a city. We have a lot of
In a
colleagues
major
spread
city at
across,
that.
yes, across the country. The way that we scaled it is, of course, we always start with our corporate-based colleagues because it's, low-hanging fruit, so to speak. It's easier for us to be able to roll the programming out pretty much out of the box to those colleagues. But we also take a phased approach to make sure that we have sufficient time to build an experience that is customized for the other business units or other roles that we have across CVS Health. So while we've spent the last year and a half, 2 years rolling this out across our corporate businesses, we are now in the process of creating that customization to more formally roll this out within our distribution centers and our store footprint as well, to make sure that we're able to reach those colleagues. Now, they haven't gone without this content because as I mentioned, we have the senior level leadership of those business units that have already been immersed in this. So their team members have already started to feel it. We have this thing that we do called meeting in a box, and we often include, principles around Include and the learning in that meeting in the box to make it easy for leaders to be able to, introduce those concepts to their teams in meetings. But we are taking that approach to, again, make sure that everyone gets the experience that is conducive to their being able to really absorb the spirit and intent behind Include based on where they sit in our business. And so today, we are at around 35,000 colleagues that have completed Include across our business.
Wonderful. And that is so significant, so significant. And to address one of the questions in the chat, someone asked, and I lost the question, I believe that they asked if this was a web-based or in-person program. Include can be rolled out in a number of different ways. So we can actually, NLI can actually have facilitators come into an organization and have it as a face-to-face experience. But we also have two different ways of web-based training. One where there are a series of 3-hour-long courses, and now we're doing even some of those as 3 90-minute courses that are conducted typically by Zoom or a similar platform. And then our other modality is where employees can watch a series of short videos around 5 minutes or so. They then have materials that they have access to that give additional research, additional training. And then at the conclusion of that, there's the option to have a 1-hour sort of capstone event that's typically by Zoom or some other similar platform where they can engage with an NLI facilitator just to answer any questions and really talk about implementation plans. And then even with each of those opportunities, we still have the ability to customize it to work for your organization. So when we roll something like this out for a corporate customer, it may look different than the way it looks for a retail customer like CVS, or even if we have a manufacturing or warehouse-based customer. So we have the opportunity and the ability to really, as Arnisha put it, really meet everyone where they are and roll the content out in a way that's going to be most both accessible and meaningful for that particular individual. And we do have some train the trainers. Typically that's within an organization. So there's some companies who say, we want to conduct this training ourselves and we want to be able to do it on an ongoing basis. So we can actually go into that organization and train some of their staff, maybe someone within their training department or HR department or DEI department, whichever area that may be. So they can then roll this out to their organization for, the next several years as they have new hires come in and that sort of thing. So we really do work to create any number of ways to roll this out, depending on the industry, depending on what's going to work best for that company. So great questions. Keep those coming. I appreciate it. So Arnisha, back to you. So you talked some about scaling it and the number of individuals that you've been able to roll this out to, which is significant. But when we think about that, what are some of the impacts that you've seen? You talked some about, hearing the talk in the hallway, but what are some of the impacts that you've noticed? Any changes that you see or just conversations that may sound a little different than they sounded previously?
Yeah, I think the biggest impact is the awareness that Include drives that this is for all. We want to make sure that our colleagues feel that this journey that we're on is about all of us because everyone's experience is relevant. It matters, particularly for a consumer-facing company like CVS Health. We can leverage those experiences to help us meet the needs of our customers and our patients. And so Include is really bringing folks together and allowing people to see just how simple it is to be an inclusive leader. And you don't have to be formally a leader, you don't have to have a team, but you can demonstrate those leadership behaviors to bring people together to foster that sense of inclusion and belonging. And so the appetite that folks have for this, we never hear from anyone, what's next, or we need more of this. And that is consistently what we're getting is what's next. And we need more of this. This is helping our team. Our team is engaged. They enjoy it. We had the pleasure of also having the behavioral change survey, administered for us as well. And I believe those results were amazing. We have a lot of individuals who have taken Include, who are actively applying Include principles in their day-to-day. And that's what we want to, see and hear, because we don't want this to be something that people do in addition to, like, oh, I come to work every day, I do my job, and then, oh, let me think about inclusion. We want it to be a habit, and we want it to be something that people just do as a natural part of how they show up every day and the work that they do.
Perfect. And to give a little more information and insight on the survey that she just mentioned, our behavior change survey, one of the ways we really measure the effectiveness of training is to look at how frequently individuals are implementing those new habits. So I'm sure each of you have attended dozens, if not hundreds of training courses throughout your career. And so often that information, you sort of file it away, but it may not actually cause you to do things differently. And that's the goal. We want to have these conversations. We want to create this common language, but we want to see team members able to actually implement this and behave in a different way. So some of the questions we ask are, how often are you implementing the habits of include? So when we talk about finding common ground, how frequently do you find yourself doing that on a weekly or monthly basis? And that's a great indicator as to how effective this training has been. And when we can see individuals not just talking about it, but actually being about it, if you will, actually implementing those habits, that's when, sort of the rubber meets the road and we really get the full impact of what's possible. The other thing is, it also, I think, really underscores how this is for everyone. This isn't just about rolling this out to certain population. It isn't just about making sure racial minorities now feel comfortable or leaders now know it. It's really the idea that this affects everyone. And when we all infuse it as a part of our day-to-day jobs, it becomes much more effective. I often ask people, whose job is it in an organization to be fiscally responsible? And I think most people would agree that's everybody's job. Mm-hmm. Regardless of your job title. So it doesn't matter if you sit in the finance department, in the marketing department, or in the DEI department. We want everyone within an organization to behave fiscally responsibly. And I believe the same is true when we think about inclusion and diversity and all of those imperatives. It isn't just the job of your department, Arnisha. It's not just for you all to prioritize DEI. The goal is for everyone to think about it and to be cognizant of it and to just weave it into the way you behave on a daily basis. It isn't that thing where, oh yeah, let me go out and be inclusive. It just becomes a natural part of who you are. So in my opinion, that's the goal. But Arnisha, when I say that, what are your thoughts or sort of reactions to that thought?
I love that because we often make that comparison when we ask folks to do something. We're like, we ask a leader to hit the bottom line. There's never any question that they're going to get it done. And if you think about, when we typically talk about, like from a data perspective, we call it human capital. And so the same way that we will treat, other forms of capital with care, we will make sure that we're taking care to maximize it. We have to do the same thing with our human capital. And we believe that our 300,000 colleagues are an asset for us. And as such, we have to make sure that we're creating an environment that is inclusive, that drives that sense of belonging, that empowers them to then be able to really positively influence the way in which we take care of our customers and our patients. So I love the analogy with the finance correlation there.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you. So we have a question in the chat that I would love to address. Amy asked, how are you finding effective ways to address national DEI pushback? And, in my opinion, a lot of that pushback comes because so many people assume DEI conversations are not for everybody and that DEI philosophies and initiatives don't benefit everybody. And with the way we approach include, and I think it's some of what Arnisha has already shared with us today, but our approach with this is it really does benefit everyone. This isn't about focusing solely on any one individual or any one aspect of our identity. It's about acknowledging that we all have multiple components to who we are. We are all a series of ands. And because of that, there are going to be times where each of us feel excluded, where each of us feel like this is not a group that is natural to me. This is not a group that I walk into and look around and immediately see every aspect of my identity. And when we start with that understanding, then I think we can understand why this really does apply to everyone. And when we can talk about the benefits of DEI initiatives in terms of how it is going to benefit the organization overall, how it is going to help team effectiveness overall, we can start to kind of push back on that pushback, if that makes sense. Because again, I think that pushback tends to come from a place of you're only talking about 13% of the population when you're talking about DEI, or you're only talking about women. What about the rest of us? And in our approach and in the way that we really address inclusion through include, it starts with the premise of this is for everyone and this is going to benefit everyone. And it is going to make all of our teams more effective. In doing that, obviously, we are going to lift up those who have been traditionally excluded. That is very much a goal and very much something that we need to do. But it isn't lifting one group to the exclusion of others. It's really giving us all the habits to recognize who each of us are and to find ways to show up with all of our identities and to find ways to make sure we all feel included regardless of each of those. And not just included, I would say appreciated. We can include people, but also appreciating those differences, appreciating some of those unique qualities. I think something that we sometimes leave out when we talk about inclusion is we can get to the point where we talk about it almost in terms of assimilating to where everybody becomes the same. And I don't think that's the goal. I think what we really want is to recognize the unique abilities, the unique perspectives that each of us bring, and then understand that through each of those, we as an organization grow our collective knowledge when everyone can participate in that way. We sometimes hear people talk about being a culture fit. And in my opinion, include, and so much of the content that we have here at NLI doesn't get to the goal of being a culture fit. It gets to the goal of being a culture add, where everyone can bring their unique identity and add to the culture of who we are. And not just the culture, but add to the collective knowledge of that organization so we can draw from it. But Arnisha, as I go on that very long answer, would love to hear your thoughts and if that hopefully how that experience resonates both for you personally and for CVS overall.
Yeah, I think, just to add to what you said, there's also the element of dignity. And this is what include allows us to be able to do is to dignify differences. There are segments of our colleague population that, sometimes we tend to other based on their experiences, or based on how they identify, just because their experience isn't as seamless and as easy as others' experiences. And so I think what include allows us to do is to provide that uniqueness with dignity. If you think about finding common ground, it's not that we're not focusing on differences, because our differences are a strength and that makes us better. But it's also helping people understand that even though we might be different, there's commonality. And just going back to the basic principle of we're all human beings and we all have a brain. And this is what our brain does when we experience this versus this is what our brain does when we experience that. And it's dignity in that, in recognizing that commonality. And so that's one of the great strengths of include, is it sort of breaks down those walls and those preconceived notions and assumptions about what this is. And it just really provides a space and place for people to come together, and honoring differences, but with dignity.
I completely agree. One of the research studies that we talk about oftentimes with include is the fact that when we feel a sense of exclusion, our brains register that in a very similar way to how it registers physical pain. And that is something that happens no matter our identity, regardless of our race, our gender, sexual orientation, etc. Each of us have an innate desire to feel included and appreciated for who we are. And to the point that when we do feel like we've been excluded, even if it's from something incredibly minor, our brains register that as if we are in pain. And as each of you, I'm sure, can imagine, when I feel physical pain, I am not doing my best work. I have no desire to collaborate. Quite honestly, I'd rather just stay in the bed and pull the covers up. So knowing that each of us at our core have that as a part of who we are really underscores why this is so important. And again, to go back to the question that was asked earlier, really helps with that national pushback. When we think about inclusion, that is something that everyone needs. While we have to acknowledge some people tend to feel it more often than others, for a number of reasons, the goal is still for everybody to experience that and to acknowledge that each of us, regardless of our identity, are going to have times that we don't experience that. So starting with that as the goal really helps to understand both why this matters, how it affects everyone, and again, a way to kind of push back on that pushback. I need another phrase instead of just pushing back on the pushback, but it really helps to underscore, I think, why that is so important. And there's one other question here in the chat I would love to respond to. Vanessa asked, let's see here. Can you please share any of the incentives that have been used to encourage implementation of the habits? So as you think about, Arnisha, as you think about the way you roll this out, if you're able to speak to how did you encourage participation, or did you just sort of, did a lot of your leaders really understand the value of this? What were some of those levers that you used to help encourage or help demonstrate, maybe is a better word, why this was so important and impactful?
Yeah, so we've continued to consistently communicate for our leaders that, we really encourage them to leverage include as a benefit. And so being able to have leaders who have engaged in this way and provide testimonials and direct feedback to their peers. So this is really spread by word of mouth. We have leveraged all of our communications channels, but really by word of mouth. So one leader has a in-person facilitated session, and then their teams just rave about it. And then the next leader is like, oh, well, I want that for my team. Can you do this for me? And so that has really led to the adoption of this across our enterprise. But I'll also say, just kind of piggybacking off of what you said about the pain, like equating exclusion to the pain, the reverse is true when we're included. That joy and excitement and fulfillment and satisfaction that we feel, in our brains is prevalent as well. And so one of the things that we do to reinforce participation is when we find leaders, when we catch people doing something right, we leverage our recognition system that we have at work, or at CVS Health, to reward colleagues, to recognize publicly. So it's a platform that's available to all of our colleagues. Whenever you recognize someone, they see it. You have the ability to award points that they can accumulate for gifts from a catalog. And so that's just another way that we reinforce. And we know recognition has a positive impact on the brain as well. And so that's just another way that we're continually reinforcing that this is important to us and that we want to catch people who are doing it right and reward them for doing so. And we encourage leaders to do the same with their teams.
Wonderful. What a great both sustainment tool, but also a way, and anyone who's familiar with NLI, you've probably heard us talk about priorities, habits, and systems. So the priority here is clearly inclusion and creating those effective teams. The habits are what we've rolled out with include, and we've talked about those 3 habits, but then the system to support that is what Arnisha just described. And having rewards that when we find people doing the right things, you're able to acknowledge that. And when you have alignment between your priorities that exist in your organization, the habits that you've rolled out to your team members, and then the systems to support that, that's when we really have the opportunity to experience the full potential and full opportunity that I think we have with something like include. So I love that you've really woven that into who CVS Health is. That is such a priority, and unfortunately something that sometimes organizations miss. You can talk about the habits, but if you're not acknowledging and rewarding those in your systems, people are going to always default to what's rewarded. So you may say to someone, inclusion is important, but then if you don't have any systems that support that, they're going to say, oh yeah, I hear what you're saying, but what you're rewarding is this, so I'm going to go do that. So it was that sort of the thinking when you all were sort of making sure you infuse this across the board and into those systems?
Absolutely. And there's such a nice correlation between the include principles and habits and our what we call hard at work behaviors that we continually reinforce within our culture. So when you go into that recognition system, you have the ability to pick which hard at work behavior you would like to recognize your colleagues for. And because there's such a nice correlation, and we've actually taken steps to show direct linkage between the two, it's very easy to demonstrate how inclusion and belonging is almost an expectation from a behavioral perspective within our enterprise, because include, ties very nicely to, one of the 6 hard at work behaviors that we have.
Wonderful. And that is so important. When an organization has their vision and their culture and sort of mission that is publicly stated as it should be, you want to make sure that the habits you are rolling out with any kind of priority and training really supports that. And it sounds like there's great alignment there that already exists within CVS Health. So again, that's going to help really support this work and to keep that learning going and to keep that sustainment going, making sure this doesn't become a one and done kind of check the box moment. So I love that that's in place. So we're getting close to wrapping things up. And as we approach that, I would love anyone else in the chat, feel free to drop any other questions that you have. We want to make sure we're addressing all of those. But Arnisha, I would love to just give you the floor to sort of any other thoughts, anything else about how this experience has been thus far for CVS Health, what may be next on the horizon for you, and maybe what you're most proud of thus far about this experience for CVS Health.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I'll start with what I'm most proud of. I'm most proud of the ease with which our organization has embraced include. We have a lot of competing priorities. There are tons of training demands as well on everyone's plate. And, the fact that people are reaching out to us to ask us how they can get involved and how they can get engaged. We have a number of individuals. I don't have the exact number, but we have plenty of volunteers across our enterprise who have stood up, taken the trainer so that they too can help us expand our reach, and making sure that more colleagues have the opportunity to experience this with their teams. But I'm also, so happy that we've been able to build an experience with our colleagues at the center, not in the middle, so that, we were able to work out some of the kinks early on with the user experience by, again, making sure that we engage colleagues from across the business to help us design this experience, because it's really important that we can reach everybody. And as I've mentioned before, that we're meeting people where they're at. The other thing I'll say is just the partnership with NLI. Look, we are a huge company, highly matrixed, highly complex. And it's been a challenge at times for us to sort of navigate that, to be able to design an experience. But everything that we've asked for, NLI has been willing to support us with. Going back to the sustainment, so we chose to do a recorded habit activation lab. That was facilitated by David Rock and some of our very own CVS Health colleagues who helped us build this experience. They were able to share very directly their own experience with helping create the Include experience for the enterprise, but then also how it's impacting them. And overwhelmingly, what we heard from our colleagues is what we've been talking about today, that with this learning experience, I feel seen, I feel heard, I feel valued, and I feel included. And at the end of the day, if we had, one or 30,000 or all 300,000 of our colleagues participate in this learning experience, the fact that we have individuals walking away from it with those feelings and those sentiments is a huge win for me.
I agree completely. And especially when you see those sentiments coming from sort of that diagonal slice of your organization. So across multiple business units, across multiple demographics, across multiple levels within the organization. I think for me, that's one of the hallmarks of a successful rollout. So kudos to you in the way that you have approached this. I know I love this partnership. I think it has been an amazing thing for both organizations. But I think you summarized it perfectly. Having team members that can come back and say, we feel seen, we feel heard, and we feel valued. And you mentioned it earlier. I talked a bit about how the brain registers exclusion as pain, but you are absolutely right. The brain registers that inclusion as a joyous kind of dopamine-filled moment. And when people are experiencing that, it's contagious. It makes us want to pass that on to others. It makes us want to continue to engage in that behavior. And we know the benefits of it. We know when we have team members that feel included and engaged, organizations tend to see higher retention numbers. They tend to see higher profits. They tend to see higher innovation. And they just get to a better place, more productive place within the organization. So we've talked a lot about how people feel and how important that is. But at the end of the day, there are also always wonderful, positive business outcomes that come as a result of that. So anytime you can have those two-handed sort of those two positives, I think that's a great thing. So thank you so much for your time with us, Arnisha. I have absolutely loved this conversation. And I think we have shared a lot of really important nuggets. There was one question I just want to quickly roll back up to it to make sure we're getting it. Let's see. Can you give me an example of the hard at work habits that you have defined? Jean asked that. I don't remember what that was in relation to. Arnisha, do you recall?
Oh, yeah. So we talked about our hard at work behaviors that
Yes.
we reinforce within, and I talked about how nicely they correlate with the include principle. So if you think about, we have create clarity as an include habit. We have create simplicity within our CVS family. So we're able to add that. We have, inspiring trust and finding common ground. And so as include habits, and within our enterprise we have rising to the challenge, we have joining forces. So those are just ways when we are recognizing our colleagues for their participation and include, we make that connection back to the behaviors that we're reinforcing within our enterprise.
Perfect. Thank you very much. And I love how well those go hand in hand. Again, it really speaks to that alignment between the overall organizational priorities and those habits that we are rolling out and hoping to see on a day-to-day basis. And then the fact that you have the systems to really support that. So this has been a conversation I have absolutely loved. Thank you so much, Arnisha, for sharing your
Oh,
journey,
thank
for sharing
you.
the CVS journey. And thank you so much for this partnership and really finding ways to make sure you bring Include alive for your entire population. And I think an organization as diverse as CVS Health really does underscore why this material is so important and how impactful it can be. So thank you for all you have done thus far and for that continued partnership. Thank you to each of you who have joined us. So with that, I am going to turn things back over to Shelby to wrap things up for us. But thank you all so much from at least from me. Have a wonderful rest of your week and a great weekend. Shelby, over to you.
Awesome. Thank you, Christy and Arnisha, for today's discussion. We appreciate your time with us. Now for closing, we are going to share a poll. Let us know how NLI can help you in the future. A few housekeeping notes. So Insider Exchange is specifically for senior executives. If you enjoy your Brain at Work Live, we think you'll love Insider Exchange. It's an opportunity to sit with our leaders and have roundtable discussions about new innovations and programs that we're doing. So if you're interested, we will share that link. And also, if you want to host an event with NLI, we want to continue to partner with our community. So if your organization is interested in hosting us in the future, please check out the link in the chat, and we look forward to having more conversations around how we can find these opportunities and expand. And if you enjoyed today's conversation, you know where to find us on our podcast, Your Brain at Work. We have our episodes here that are live and also other standoff episodes. So this is where we say farewell. On behalf of our guests behind the scenes and everyone here, thank you so much. We appreciate you, and we'll see you back next Friday.